Authorities in the Vatican and Rome have put massive security measures in place for Pope Francis' funeral on Saturday. Thousands of police officers will be deployed, with reinforcements arriving from several Italian regions, along with security personnel from about 130 foreign delegations. According to local officials, the area around the Vatican and along the route of the funeral procession will be protected by comprehensive security presence covering threats from the air, land, and sea. In addition to the security arrangements, health measures have been put in place by the Lazio region. Pope Francis, who had been recovering after being hospitalized for 5 weeks with double pneumonia, died on Monday at the age of 88. Pope Francis' funeral will be held on Saturday at 10 a.m. in St. Peter's Square and attended by world leaders, including Argentine President Javier Milei, U.S. President Donald Trump, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. So far, 130 official presences have been confirmed, including 10 royals and numerous prime ministers and ambassadors. According to current norms, the conclave to choose Francis' successor will begin between the 5th and the 10th of May.
U.S. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump have left Washington for Rome, where they will join heads of state and royalty for Pope Francis' funeral on Saturday. Trump repeated his prediction that he'll be meeting with foreign leaders on the sidelines of the funeral, saying that it is going to be, quote, very interesting. He also said he met the Pope twice and that he, quote, loved the world and was just a good man.
At least 3 people were killed by Russian drone attacks on Friday in Ukraine's eastern town of Pavlorad. The strike sparked a fire on an apartment building in the city. The regional governor said that at least 14 people have been left injured. According to Ukraine's armed forces, Russia launched 103 attacks over Ukraine from Thursday into Friday, 41 of which were shot down and 40 going off radar. The regions affected include Kharkiv, Sumy and Cherkasy. Meanwhile, hours later, U.S. envoy Stephen Witkoff arrived in Moscow for more talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin about Ukraine's peace plan. Ukraine has previously made clear that its priorities in negotiating remain the preservation of territory and stopping the Russian aggression.
A high-ranking Russian general has been killed in an apparent car blast near Moscow, says local media. Lieutenant General Yaroslav Moskalik died after a Volkswagen Golf exploded in a residential area in the city of Balashikha, authorities said. Investigators have opened a criminal investigation. The incident comes just days after heavy Russian airstrikes on Kyiv, in which at least 12 people have died.
U.S. President Donald Trump says Russia made a pretty big concession by stopping short of seizing all of Ukraine. Trump made the comments as he hosted Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre at the Oval Office to discuss trade and the ongoing war in Ukraine.
What concessions has Russia offered up thus far to get to the point where you're closer to peace?
Stopping the war, taking the whole country. Pretty big concession.
Ukraine and much of Europe have fiercely pushed back against this notion, arguing that it's hardly a concession for Russia to pause its land grab. But Trump insists that peace talks are going well and progressing, reiterating his belief that both countries genuinely want peace. He also added that he has a deadline in mind for ending the war, warning that Washington's attitude could drastically change after then.
I have my own deadline, and we want it to be fast, and the Prime Minister is helping us. He wants it to be fast too. And I think everybody at this time in NATO, they want to see this thing happen. So we have a deadline, and after that we're going to have a very much different attitude.
Trump says his only objective is to end the bloodshed, noting that 5,000 young soldiers are dying weekly from both sides on the front lines. Maintaining a positive outlook, the U.S. president said he believes there is a very good chance of ending the war in the near future.
Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars have been fighting against Russian occupation and annexation of Crimea since the very beginning of Russian invasion in 2014. The chairman of the Crimean Tatar Mejlis told Euronews as he recalls how Ukraine's international partners were asking Crimean citizens not to provoke Russia.
Всі наші партнери, союзники тоді виступали з позиції, що не треба провокувати Росію, що вони разом з українською державою обов'язково знайдуть форми і шляхи, як тоді говорили, розв'язання цього кризису. Я цитую те, що говорили мені, я був тоді в окупованому Криму. Той, хто докіряє нам, що ми не здійснили спротив, я думаю, що треба згадати трусливу позицію власних держав, які виступали гарантами безпеки української держави в межах Будапештського меморандуму.
Commenting on Donald Trump's claim that Crimea was, quote, handed over to Russia without a shot being fired, unquote, Chubarov says it is both false and disrespectful.
Це велика зневага до і українських військових, які були вбиті перші дні захоплення. Протягом найближчих місяців з моменту окупації у травні, в червні почали насильницькі викрадання наших молодих людей. Ми їх потім знаходили деяких вбитими, деяких до цього дня ми не можемо знайти, ми не знаємо, де вони. Говорити про те, що, мовляв, Крим було взято без жодного пострілу або без жодної жертви, це просто зневажати і людьми, які були в тій ситуації, і просто зізнаватися у своєму просто незнанні тих подій.
Donald Trump has increased pressure on Kyiv regarding territorial concessions from Ukraine, which could allegedly include recognizing the annexation of Crimea, the idea Kyiv and Crimean Tatars have repeatedly rejected.
Indian troops exchanged fire with Pakistani soldiers along the two countries' highly militarized border in Kashmir, according to Indian officials. They said Pakistani soldiers fired at an Indian position and that Indian troops retaliated. No casualties were reported. The gunfight comes amid soaring tensions between the nuclear-armed rivals following a deadly attack on tourists in Kashmir, which killed 26 people. India accused Islamabad of cross-border terrorism, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi vowed to retaliate.
I say to the whole world, India will identify, track and punish every terrorist and their backers. We will pursue them to the ends of the earth.
Pakistan denied any connection to the attack, but that hasn't stopped New Delhi from retaliating. India suspended a water-sharing treaty, shut down the land border crossing and revoked visas for Pakistani nationals. Islamabad cancelled visas for Indian citizens, halted trade and warned that diverting the flow of water would be considered an act of war.
Frontex's executive director Hans Leiten says he wished no migrants were returned to Libya, where they often face human rights abuses. But sometimes, he says, he has no choice. The EU's external border and coast guard agency Frontex is regularly challenged by human rights groups for not doing enough to save lives at sea. Its use of aerial surveillance to enable the Libyan Coast Guard to intercept migrant boats often results in vessels returned to Libya.
I don't want people to be returned to Libya. That's the only way we can do it, is to inform this Maritime Rescue Coordination Center. And if it's in Libyan territory, it's the Libyans who have to take the responsibility, and they do. And I've been asked, okay, but why don't you just skip the Libyans and only inform the NGOs? But that would mean that I would play with human lives. Because if the NGOs are not available, then there's no coordination, then people might drown. And I cannot take that responsibility. So as much as I do not like people to be returned to Libya, if I have to choose, again, I'd rather save lives than not save lives.
Meanwhile, NGOs which actively reach out to help migrants from dying in the sea are regularly criticized by member states, even prosecuted and accused of supporting smuggling. But Mr. Leitens believes his role is to work alongside NGOs in the protection of lives at sea.
For me, NGOs are part of the ecosystem. I'm in touch with them, we speak, we try to understand each other's positions, we try to make sure that we don't sort of block each other's, because we all see the need to save lives at sea, for example. And also, by the way, NGOs, we cooperate in a way. For example, what we do is, after return people, we have a so-called post-return program, which is meant to help people pick up their lives again. And for this, we hire actually NGOs to perform this on our behalf with European or Frontex funding. So I think it's actually a more nuanced picture than often being told.
You can watch the full interview with Frontex's executive director next Thursday on the Europe Conversation.